Well, thank you very much for having me and for everyone coming out on this rainy morning. So right now thank you for the introduction. I help VCs mainly do AI due diligence, which means I see only hundreds of pitch decks compared to probably thousands for investors. And I got there by being a very seasoned data nerd. So today what I wanted to do is, you see all the blog posts on here's advice, how do you improve your pitch deck? And originally that's what I said, we'll just go through advice that I've shared in the past. But I realized I wanted you to have the experience that investors do when you see a pitch deck. So what I'm going to do is, first, I've prepared a very generic pitch deck that covers the majority of the pitch decks that I see. And I'll have the investors in the audience hold me accountable. And then we'll walk through how to actually make it better so that you stand out. And I'll take prompts from the audience around things. So this is actually going to be very interactive. And we may not go through all of the slides. So the rest is going to be homework.
I'll be back here walking around with the mic for what you mentioned.
Perfect. Yeah. So disclaimer, I made all this up. So if you recognize your startup, that was an accident. So first prompt, what industry do we want to work in? What industry do we want to pitch? And I'll take at least a few. Space tech, awesome. Anything else? Let's say something different. Yeah. Project management, awesome. Love it. AI, yeah, that sounds good. Any vague problem we want to focus in space tech and project management? What do we think might be a problem? Mm-hmm. Data management. Yeah, love that. Okay, awesome. So this is the first draft of the pitch deck. And again, like I did a Google search and they said, okay, here's a way to do it. So our vague challenge is we're going to help something, data management around project management or data management around space tech. We're going to use AI, also screenshot from different websites. Oh, you can't see that. Yeah. Sorry, AI. Okay. Oh yeah, perfect. Okay. We're going to charge $10 a month. We don't have any competition. Or maybe we had some competition, but we've decided we completely stand out based on our unique criteria. Or we still don't have competition, even though we're maybe in the hardware space, and I know Apple and Google and Fitbit and everyone else is doing it. It's $1 billion market. We can get there. We're going to IPO in 5 years. We're going to start next quarter. Our team, my husband agreed to be the team. We need some salary to get started, and we're going to spend it on Facebook advertising and maybe some influencer marketing, or maybe to build out my MVP. Okay. Yeah, I didn't think so. That's why we're here. And this, I will say, this is the majority of the pitch deck. So for those that are investors, anyone want to say, how reflective is that of what you've seen? Or is there anything that stands out? Is that fairly? Yeah, that's fairly. So I've also shared this with about 5 investors in my network, small sample size, and they also agreed. This is the majority of what we see. So what happened? Let's go back. We'll go slide by slide, and then we'll talk about how to improve all of that. So we could tell this was very vague. We'll go into how to make that more specific. Also, or actually, I'll start with you. Anything that you've, before I go slide by slide, like what jumped out, any issues that you see off the bat before we go slide by slide? Yeah, go ahead.
Hi, my name is Sebastian. I'm in the AI space and work in Liquor. And I built a company in the last 5 years in this space to get funding and launch. So I worked on my deck, and asking 10 people, I get 11 opinions. The biggest learn I had the last 6 weeks since I focused on finishing my deck is the why. Mm-hmm. Really stand out the why versus what and how. Mm-hmm. So I'm missing the why here. Why are you doing this? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I agree with that. Yeah. Yeah, that sounds good. Yeah, and I agree with you that you'll get a pitch deck for most of the pitch decks. Yeah, I'm surprised you got 11 opinions and not 20. But I will say the ones that resonate will resonate across the board, the majority. But for those that maybe don't resonate at a high level, people will have different things to pick on and depending on what their background is. But yeah. Go ahead.
Hey everyone, I'm David Delgado. I'm with the City Fund Tech Community Strategy. So not only the why, but the why now, I feel is really important. Like, why is this relevant to be having this conversation right now? What makes this a unique time to invest in this? But then for the business model, there's absolutely no nuance here. There are complicating factors in everything. There's a different scale for large companies versus small companies. We'll just saying it's a single subscription.
Yeah, completely agree. Anyone else? Yeah, go ahead.
Who are the subscribers?
Yeah. That's right. We don't know. Yeah, I completely agree. Yeah. That's right. Not clear. Completely agree. We understand there's some competition. I will say here, right? We don't even know. Like, I literally just made up the numbers in Excel to get that chart. Like, who knows what that's going to look like and if it's actually going to go up. I will say so who recognized more than one logo here? Awesome. Which one is that? Oh, awesome. Okay. Yeah. Anyone else? So Ipsos is, I feel like if you're not in market, so I don't know if you have done market research, but if you're not in market research, nobody's heard of it. So I've on purpose picked the most obscure logos. Anyone else who recognized, I would say UCLA, we got Ipsos. Anyone recognize any of the other logos? Yeah. Oh, yeah. Cal. Yeah. So if you've gone to Berkeley, you know the logo, but otherwise you wouldn't. And then the last one, I don't know if anyone recognized. So my husband worked there many, many years ago. And after many, many acquisitions, it's been bought by IBM Watson, but you wouldn't know because you also don't know. And I haven't told you any of our backgrounds. Well, you've heard about my background, but that was unfair. So you don't even know, right? Are we the right team? Like, what are we doing? How does this even tie into what I pitched? Even if we're doing, we said data management. I mean, yeah, we met in grad school, but you wouldn't know that. And then of course this, right? This also didn't buy probably any rapport on, well, okay, so what's been developed? We're not even sure. Okay, awesome. So first I wanted to take a step back and then give you a little bit more context around like how, why are we even pitching? I mean, obviously we're, to get funding, but even how do funds work? So the short answer is funds exist because very wealthy individuals want to diversify the investments. And so they think that they can get a better return than, the stock market and all the other traditional investments. And the way that the funds make money is they have a model that's like 2 and 20. So 2% of the fund gets paid out in management fees, and then they make back 20% of the return after they've paid out the investors. So the goal of the pitch deck then is, I would argue, is not to get investment, it's to get the next meeting, to keep going in that process to eventually get funding. So the more that you can talk about how you can be a quote unquote sure thing, the more likely you're going to get an investment. And so we'll walk through 3 different iterations on how to improve your pitch deck better and better. Okay, so the first one, as somebody pointed out, this was super, super vague. And we weren't sure, what are we doing in the data management space around project management or space? So the first problem that I see people do then is add a lot of technical details, depending on your industry. So I've seen all of these things. There'll be formulas, there'll be chemical formulas. In MedTech, I've seen surgeries. I almost passed out watching that, but I also didn't understand, like, where was the product? What was happening? I, just don't have the background. We talked about database management. I will see names and and it's okay, sure, unless it's super relevant. And of course, anatomical diagrams. So lots and lots of technical details. So I said, I'm going to also pick on myself. So this was my thesis title. We now know there's like remote work and there's applications, but I would argue it is really not clear what is going on here. Like, why did I even do this? Let's see, there we go. But what if I change the title to say something like this? Now, you can come talk to me about Jupiter, the weather, and things like that, and we can geek out. And we talked about, space. So maybe there's something around data in space around that. But it was really, really not clear. I will also say, if I can't understand, I can't introduce. So if I want to make an introduction to VC, I would actually love to have a compelling thing just in the subject line of, hey, can I introduce you to company name that does like a half sentence that makes it very compelling so that they open they open the email. And then usually it's like, here's the name, here's how I know them and why I think they're great. So if I can't even, I really struggled, it was yesterday, with actually one in aerospace where I think I understood it, but then I had to, I thought it was compelling, but again, I had to put a disclaimer. I think I understand, and that's not as great of an introduction if I can say, this is what they do and this is why it's compelling. So we talked about, somebody pointed out, like, it's really not clear, like, what value are we bringing? And so this slide and then the next one. So these were 2 articles in the Harvard Business Review that if you're going direct to consumer, there's 30 ways that your company can bring value. And then if you're in the B2B space, there's actually 40 different ways. So I would say pick one. So do we want to go enterprise or direct to consumer for, let's say our project management one?
Share that.
Yes, and there'll be, that's a good question. And at the end of the slides, I'll also share the link. The slides are already up. Yes.
The title for both of those elements of value. So if you
Yes.
that and part of business would be find both of them.
Yes. Agreed. Yeah. Any specific, or do we want to just go B2B? Let's go B2B, both of them. Aerospace project management. What value do we think we want to bring? Is it productivity, performance? Performance sounds good. Okay. Any specific within performance? We got product quality, scalability, innovation. Those are super big. Innovation. Let's do it. Okay. We did that. Okay, so now we're going to get even more specific. I would argue make it very, very personable. And so this one and the next 2 slides. So make it, let's say, Jane, what are we doing? What are we helping Jane with around innovation and, let's say, project management? And then we'll do the same with space tech. So what is something that she's currently doing that we would like to help with, what do we say? Performance and innovation.
Creating responsive and dynamic project plans.
Sure. Yeah, that sounds good. Let's do it. Awesome. And then an adjective. So what, overwhelmed, or I don't know who, maybe you can talk about your customer. We'll do your pitch deck now.
So Jane is overwhelmed.
Is it what?
Overwhelmed.
Oh, overwhelmed. Yeah.
Trying to make project plan, trying to prioritize projects within the dynamic, ever-changing.
Yeah. Okay. That sounds good. So yeah, we'll work on it. So let's see if we can do, so then who would you be going after? So she's overwhelmed project manager. So more specifically, is she in real estate? Is it software? And then what are these plans? And you don't have to, I don't know if anyone else wants to jump in.
It doesn't have to be economic, maybe anybody.
Yeah.
You can just make stuff.
Yeah, we're going to make stuff up. Yeah. Yeah. Sure. So we had here was, Jane is an overwhelmed project manager, working on ever evolving portfolio projects. Yeah. In software. Yeah. So then who would be maybe go ahead. Mm-hmm.
I'm advising for a startup that is building a marketplace for luxury goods. So Jane is trying to sell $200,000 Rolex watches in a trusted market.
Yeah, that sounds good. Yeah. And then I'm going to riff on yours to tie it back to the other one too, then is overwhelmed project manager working on $2 million homes, trying to figure out how to build that as things evolve during the build process or something like that. And we're helping it become more efficient because the value that we bring is performance, so that hopefully they go down from spending, I don't know, let's say 6 months on something to getting it down to 2 weeks or something like that. So we'll walk through it. And then what you'll see is now our go-to-market is we're going after people that are buying $200,000 watches and people that are going to be buying the $2 million houses. Now we kind of niched it down so that you know who you're going after. Hopefully. So after we went through this a little bit, who was able to put yourself in your customer's shoes? And if not, what else do we need? Like, do we have a visualization of, yeah, go ahead. Sure.
So when you create this value proposition and you describe this customer, does it have to be something where you describe a particular customer, or is it something where, I mean, are you limiting yourself, or is this just an example for the investor put themselves in the customer's shoes, as you put here?
That's a good question. And I would take also people's take on it. So I would say when you're pitching, I would encourage you to have one specific customer, and ideally even probably like who's going to be in your audience. So if you're pitching something in the health food space in Venice, make it tailored towards that audience versus if you have multiple products, and we'll talk about whether that's a good idea or not, pitch it to the audience that you think. Oh yeah, go ahead.
I think pitching is always about storytelling and the personalized and specific you get. You want to sell your story, and I think and telling that story.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
Can I ask any other question?
Yeah,
so normally when we hear about pitch decks, it's about target market, addressable market, and then does it go top down or bottom up? When you talk about specific customers, what would be your recommendation?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I would say until we've narrowed this down, we probably wouldn't know all the other things. And we'll go through it a little bit also of just what are those? Because in my mind, when I see those pitches, it's not clear, are those actually the numbers? Or in my opinion, is it something like I made up? It was just like, okay, that's about $1 billion. And then we can do 10% of that. But yeah, that's a really good question. So I would almost say, start with what you're solving, get it very specific, and then figure out what is that market. And then you can talk about that also more specifically because now we know who the customers are. Mm-hmm.
You solve and all of them, or do you focus on one, or do you put them in one slide? Because I solve 3 problems that I worked with for the last 12 years, and it's overwhelming when you have multiple customers in the region. So
yeah, that's a good question of just if you're doing multiple products. So I'll repeat because there was just the first part. If you're doing multiple products, do you put them all on the slides or not? So I would argue focus on one and make that the clear pitch based on your audience that you're pitching to. And then once you've solved that completely, then you can talk about, I'm doing these other problems. The only caveat to that is if the other products that you're doing, you don't have to do much work in the sense that if we're selling $200,000 watches, maybe it's going to be similar to $200,000 something else in the luxury space. I don't know. I don't know. I don't buy stuff in the, then you don't have to rework your whole product. And you can just bring that in. Then you can say, this is how I'm going to scale. I'm going to bring it to those other markets without doing that much work. What I see a lot actually is the opposite, where people are working on 6 products at the same time. And then they're fundraising to tackle those all 6 at once. And then that becomes super risky rather than saying, okay, we're the expert in this thing. We're going to solve it completely. And then we're going to go enter the other ones. Mm-hmm.
Again, I'll give a specific example. So this company that I'm advising for, its name is Barossa. So luxury marketplace, starting with Rolex watches, and then they'll do Porsches and other collectibles. I'm helping him presenting his pitch to numerous VCs here in Southern California that I have connections with, and I tell them, do your research. Like for every single VC, do your research, look into him or her, tailor your pitch to it. So for one of a top name VC here in LA, we'll call him Bob. He wears luxury watches. So put a picture of a Rolex watch at the beginning and try to personalize so that he can connect with the story that you're telling.
Exactly. And then he'll see also, oh, I have this problem. Next time I'm looking for the watch, I'm going to go to you. And that makes also the story and then the connection. Yeah. And then now when you're pitching, you'll probably have the prospective customer, exactly like that VC, where he'll say, oh, I actually need your product. Let's connect. I think the other part is we didn't even make it clear like how painful something is. So maybe right now, going back to the project management example, it's not clear. Maybe things are on Excel sheets, or maybe they're on paper. There's actually a lot of industries that are doing stuff on paper. Make us really, really feel the pain. What is it about, right now when somebody's going to buy a $2 million house or a $200,000 watch, do they have to call people? Like, is there a website? Like, how does that actually work right now if you want to go out and do what you said you're doing? Making sure things are manual, like visualize it, make us feel the pain. And then if you already have customers, if you can use those customers' words, that stands out a lot more. And then again, people in the audience who have that need will also resonate. Mm-hmm.
You guys can tell I work on the tech right now. I have a lot of recommendations for bullet points versus full out written text. What is your recommendation, the ratio? And you stick to one format, slide to slide, all bullet points, each slide, because you have so much information, or do you switch back and forth?
Yeah, that's a good question. So kind of a lot of different opinions. So I will say when I review decks, I read them cover to cover. Some people will skip around. Some investors will just say, I start with the team slide and then go from there. So this is just my experience. I would probably recommend if I can give your talk for you, that's too many words. So if you can just point specific things of making a lot of visuals so that I can understand, and then words as needed, I would probably say, and especially if you're pitching, a lot more visuals than the words. Having said that, I will also say, I think my preference is going between pitch deck diligence to pitch diligence. When you're pitching, it should still be the same deck. And if there's anything, you can always put stuff in the appendix that could be more detailed. So if people are asking you for follow-ups, they can say, oh, wait, I have this slide. We can talk more. Mm-hmm.
Not that I have any more experience than any of you guys, really. I just graduated from school in December. But from my experience that I was having with school and creating my own decks for PR classes that I was doing, I feel like if you want to make it personalized, if you're using the presentation to highlight your own self, so if you're trying to make yourself more valuable, then by putting less information on the decks, because you can send that afterwards, the deck is just going to be there to highlight yourself, I feel like. So if you're using, like you're saying, visuals to really accentuate what you're saying, because you want them to pay attention to you and not to really what you're presenting, in the sense of like, you want them looking here as much as you want them looking directly at you.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you recommend balancing that and with, focusing on you while you're going to pitch, with the fact that a lot of times they ask for a pitch deck before they even set up a meeting, and they just screen based upon the pitch deck, like the content itself, and then decide whether or not people need to invite you to an in-person meeting?
Yeah. No, that's a good question. I would still say, I think, what is that rule? The 5-5-5, like 5 bullets, 5 words max. So that you could still, like, right now, if I wasn't speaking, I think you could follow along. I'd like to think. So I'm still, you don't have full sentences here. You can probably gauge, things hopefully are painful. When we're talking about, let's say this was the graphic, maybe I'll highlight something and then point to it to say, so you can still have less words and more visuals and still tell the story. But yeah, it's definitely It's definitely hard. I'll agree. Yeah. And there's lots of, I would say some consultants will work on design with you and some will work on storytelling and things like that. But yeah, feel free to get different opinions. And, to somebody's earlier point, everyone's going to have a different opinion.
Yeah. So as far as putting together this pitch deck, you said something at the very beginning of this presentation, and that is the whole purpose is to get that next meeting. So as far as putting this together, what would you say the average attention span is of a VC? Because you can get really technical, you can put a lot of information, but then, hour later, you already lost them.
That's a good question. I've heard something like 15 seconds.
I was going to say, it's not really.
Yeah.
It's a question. I recently got introduced around like 7 months ago about a framework called as Job Should Be Done framework.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
So is it like what I'm hearing from you is, and what I'm learning is, we as any professional, we have, or even like a regular person, we have jobs to do. So project manager has a job to create project plan. A barista has a job to create a good coffee based on customer needs. And pain point always exists when a job is done. So right now, is this what we are elevating? This job right now, the way it is done is very painful, and showing that pain and how your solution is actually solving it, making it easy, and what is the market value, the total market, addressable market. And is this a one way to think about it?
Yeah. So I would say the jobs to be done framework is kind of framework to uncover what are your customers' pain points or what are they talking about. And then here, this would be the make us feel the pain. Because when we first talked about our startup, I don't know if it was, it wasn't clear to me what the pain was. We were just selling something for $10. And as Evan pointed out, I don't know, what are we getting? Like, are we even getting anything out of it? And so here it's the, what is that pain around, let's say our example is data management. Things are everywhere. Maybe this could be a picture where, I actually had this one of my clients where we said, well, why are things taking so long? And my first instinct was give a technical answer, but then I realized I can just draw it out. Okay, our data is here, here, here. We have never joined this. This we've never touched. And then after literally visualizing it on the whiteboard, they realized, oh, we do have a problem. Okay, I see. Now I know why things are taking too long. And until I pointed it out, it was just not clear when things are taking too long. So back to our project manager or some other, it's, okay, what does her day in the life right now look like without our solution? What are they actually, if they want to manage a project, what do they have to do? Or our, space tech, I guess we didn't really, what are we doing there in terms of without the solution, what do our customers actually, what are all the hoops they need to jump through to get to where they are? And I'd like to think that by the time we're done with this slide, when you're pitching it, people are on the same page and say, wow, this is super painful. Again, back to the $200,000 Porsche, I don't know if you can just walk into a dealership. You probably have to schedule an appointment and call somebody. And I don't know if they'll just let you test drive it. And if you need a special license, I don't know. Do you need to carry special insurance? Probably. What else? Like, what does that look like for that person, for them to actually buy the Porsche? Do they need to get financing? How does that work? Do you need, all of those things? If you can visualize that in a few slides, that builds the rapport of, okay, I know this industry, I know what's going on, and these are the pain points. And we're all also then feeling, oh my God, this is terrible. We need a solution. And then your next slide is, here's our solution. But actually, first we're gonna talk about competition. So your competition, I know we said, right, like there's no competition, but your competition right now is actually customer habits. I actually made the same mistake when I first started doing fractional chief data officer services. And when somebody asked me, what's your competition? I said, nobody was doing it around 2019. That was not very common, but no, could be a CTO, could be a full-time data scientist, something else. So what is the state of who's doing this now? And maybe that's not even a project manager. In some industries, it's somebody else that's doing this as a side thing. So the more then you can talk about what is happening, then again, that will buy rapport of, okay, we know it's painful. This is what that looks like right now. Let's say you're a physician. Here's all the things, and here's all the alerts, and here's all the, phone calls. Yeah, go ahead. Mm-hmm. Yeah, no.
You guys can cut me off with that, trust me. So let me understand in my problem.
Yeah.
So what I do has no direct competition, but what I identified, so I have a solution where you can find all events that go on around you on one platform, and then AI also matches you. So the current consumer habit would be, in order to find an event, talking about a comedy show, a live music event, you name it.
Friday coffee meetup.
That's right.
Meetup.
Friday coffee meetup. Yeah.
You wouldn't have to go to websites, Google, meetup.com, Eventbrite, yada, 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 versus one app on that you
Exactly.
It wouldn't be direct competition, but a habit of consumers.
Yeah.
So they go through all these steps in order to do that. How would you phrase it as making it sound like a competition?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. I don't know if you have the answer or if you had it. Yeah.
Yeah, I've got a thought, which is instead of using the word competition, how about alternatives?
Yeah, I like that.
What would someone do instead if a product doesn't exist? Yeah, what are the alternatives?
Yeah.
I don't have the single place. What about these other? Or I know that these ads pop up on Instagram, or I know that a friend to me, or
Exactly. I like that.
alternatives.
Yeah. And I would say this could be your picture too of just right now you could have images, right? Like Google search, and then you can have the search in there to say what's comedy near me. You can have the Eventbrite. You can have, that is a real problem for, I know I have, if you're trying to find like startup events like the Pasadena Coffee Meetup and things like that, you have to have us, get the alerts on Meetup, or you search for them, or you're on LinkedIn at the right time and things like that. So that could be the picture here to show here's what exists. Here's all the alternatives. I really like that, actually. Yeah.
Thanks. I mean, I got it.
Yeah, go ahead.
Listen, investors are savvy, right? They're gonna hit you every which way and sideways. So have a competition response. They're going to ask you, okay, what's going to prevent FANG companies from doing exactly this? So your answer cannot be there is no competition, right? There's very few things that are completely novel and never been attempted before, right? So you have to have an answer to the competition question. Got it?
George, you stole my thunder. That was actually exactly what it was. An investor, their job is to de-risk, right? Because they're, with their clients' money, they want to put an investment in de-risk. Well, the moment you say that I have no competition, I have very few competition, that's an industry that maybe they don't want to put money in, because why aren't there other people? My second point is I'm fortunate to have a few companies here that advise. One is actually has successfully got a round from Mucker, which is the premier LABC. So T-Win here, for work, he's also my neighbor. I want him to maybe give a couple of points on how he was able to plan a premier VC. Hi, everyone. Good morning. I'm Stephen Lin. I'm founder and CEO of Orca. And so far, I've raised around 2.4 million in 2 rounds from some VCs like Marker, Titan, which Jim is also an advisor. So I think I got a lot of great points here. But one thing I learned from my own fundraising journey is that I think the pitch deck, to me, is like a persuasive piece for you to connect with the investors. So, like for example, I agree with you. Like bullet point versus in detail, these paragraphs. I think it's always prefer bullet points because it is easier to remember. And then, like, why research a lot of like good C-round decks, there are always a lot of visuals because the visual, again, it's easier to create and build an impression on the investor so they remember you, they remember the problem you're trying to solve, be as visual, be as concise, so people, investors will remember you. And I mean, if they are the right investor, they will always, remember you and reach out to you later, and you can always provide more details. Thank you.
So back to you, Irina.
Oh, yeah. No, that sounds good. So we talked about what are they doing now? So our solution, usually there's a lot of screenshots. So my advice, and we'll talk through how to do this, is to tie into customer habits. I grew up watching Undercover Boss a lot, and I feel like one of the things that comes up again and again is there's a boss and they think we're going to change this metric, but they don't understand how it works. So then they go undercover and then they find out how things work. And so this was one where the boss actually got fired when they didn't understand what was happening. So how do we actually do this? Because right now we got to the point where we understand our customer, we understand their pain point, everyone feels the pain, and then usually there's a disconnect of just like, and then my solution is AI. Okay, but what? But how? What is going on? So I will argue, to make the pitch even more compelling, we need to go end to end of, again, they're an overwhelmed project manager or they're in the luxury space buying the watch. How do they actually go from, I have this problem, to how do they actually get the watch or get the project or get the $2 million house built? Or, we're doing something in the database space tech of what are we doing the efficient? What are we making efficient in performance so that our customer actually gets the, oh yeah, I really need this, I got the value. And two things, again, it's a hard ask making that a visual rather than the words. And then part of the end-to-end would be, you will get asked, like, how do I onboard my customer? Especially if it's B2B, like, how do you get that, how do you get their access to the data and the legalese? And, if we're, again, in the database, how are you getting that access? How is this a consulting? Is this an integration? What does that look like? For a project manager, again, of, if they're doing things on paper, how do I actually get it from paper to digital to the plan to the house being built? Really hard ask. But I would say that is where a lot of the decks fall short again. So which one do we want to work with, and how do we want to go end to end? Go ahead. Yeah.
Let me just add this. When you're trying to define the problem solution statements, I would say that there's a wealth of resources and people that are in your market that are feeling this pain on a daily basis. And if you haven't spoken to at least 100 of them prior to doing your deck, then you haven't had those conversations. You'd be surprised how many people talk about this if you just reach out. I think that's one of the biggest steps that they get so locked into their bubble. And problem can be defined, and the better your solution will be. Just want to encourage you to do that. Most people out there, if you just reach out, will be more happy.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's a part of your story. Exciting. Messaging is so important when you're pitching, particularly to investors. It has to be genuine, it has to be believable. And going back to this tension between narrow and broad, your problem has to be narrow enough that it's believable. It needs to be a big enough problem that it can be monetized, right? So most of you, I would imagine, are 0 to 1 right here in your product journey. So my suggestion, what I like to see in next is, okay, very specific problem, very well defined. That's a pain point identifies with a solution that can get you to revenue, right? Meaningful revenue in that field. And my suggestion is always to include where we go next, right? So that financial model, that chart, what I love to see, but I don't see often is, oh, here's the numbers, here's the metrics, here's how we go, here's our revenue, yes to X. But what happens in that product journey that's going to help to get you there? So you've got 0 to 1, but what's your 1 to end? What are the things you will add later that will add to that product suite that will make, right? So where do we go next? Part of it.
Yeah, thank you. And I'll rephrase the question for those that were, in case we couldn't hear it, but the question was, if you've talked to 1,000 customers, how do you synthesize that information? And I would say probably if you talk to 1,000 customers, you'll probably have repeatable things that you keep hearing again and again. So maybe you'll hear, let's say 1 to 2 different themes, and then that'll help you focus to start with one and see, okay, how, as you're going to market, how is that resonating? What's going on? And we'll talk about that. So product, usually people will try to pitch the end, but I would say, start really small. So you hear, a couple of different themes, start small. So again, with let's say the project manager, what is the one smallest thing we can do right now? Maybe it's, something in the organization or something in the, in the way that they're overwhelmed, or maybe let's say actually in the luxury watches, it's here's retailers, or here's, before you build the whole marketplace, maybe it's a list. So it's super easy to do. It could be just a, Google site or a form of just here's where it is and see who's going before you build the other features.
Yeah, the question.
Sure. Yeah.
When we people talk about MVP a lot. Can you expand on that and try to help the audience here understand what that really means? Because I feel like when I see pitches, when I see people talk about MVP, this whole idea of minimum viable product means different things to different people. But what does it mean to the investors that you work with? What does it mean when you're doing diligence for them?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. So I would say MVP would be starting to test out what you've already talked about. So the way that you're bringing a value, what is the smallest step right now that you're doing to test out your hypothesis of what's working and not? So then you can talk about, hey, I've got the 1,000 customers that are using it, or I have, 100 people every day going on my website. So then you can talk about what's happening. A lot of the time, and again, this could just be a form. This is not I would encourage also for the MVP to not go code this up and spend money developing. There's a lot of no code solutions. There's a lot of forms just to see if there's even interest in the market. So then you can make that proposition of there is demand. We said, and we're already in market testing this out to inform your next hypothesis. Because what you'll find is that you have this idea of, let's say it's, going back to project management and, $2 million homes. Maybe what you'll find is the $2 million homes are fine, but maybe it's the super luxury high-end $40 million homes that have other issues. And that's where the people are actually connecting more. So it helps you find the next niche to go to market. Because what I find is that a lot of startups will build a product and then start building the features rather than figuring out, okay, but how are people using what you've built to help you find the niche for your next experiment?
So, follow up, sorry.
Yeah, no, go ahead.
So long as we're talking about space, because we talked about that a little bit, and then of course you're going to work in medical technology. How do you think through that when it's something as kind of insane to do as space? Because you're not going to sit there and say, hey, look, here's the thing that'll carry people in space. Let's try it. And to up, like, with people on board, it's clear that things roll up and we don't. But, same medical, right?
Right.
Like if you choose to market something before you get the approval, you will fail and you should do it. So talk us through what that means in those more regulated risky space.
Yeah, that's a good question. So I would still say, what is something you can do now to solve it even a little bit? So in the medical space, a lot of people will do first cadaver studies, animal studies, a lot of, I would say starting with those two, but depending on where you are, and then research, what are other people doing as well in the MVP before they can go pilot and talk to hospitals and things like that. And in the space tech, I would say, are there certain things, are there dual uses for the same thing? And there's actually investors that are investing in dual use technology of you're going to space, but you can actually do stuff on Earth. And I highly encourage, depending on the application. So, we were in database management. There's a couple of startups in Techstars aerospace that were doing stuff in database in space, but they can do stuff here on Earth first to test things out before they get sent out and then manage data infrastructure on satellites. So that's my, I guess, non-answer.
About 5 minutes.
Okay. No, that's helpful. Awesome.
Irina, a quick question for you.
Yeah.
You see, we hear from VCs and they say they look at thousands of pitch decks a year, and I'm sure you've seen your share. What has captured your attention in the past? Now, the pitch deck is a pitch deck, but the presentation is something else. There's a gentleman I mentioned earlier, the question of why now? Can you talk about what has captured your attention when you hear these presentations?
Yeah, that's a good question. I would say it's so let me skip ahead. So part of it is, I would say the team is an unfair advantage. That's one part. That's why there's an asterisk. The other one is the flywheel model. And I'll show the links where, you hear the team and you're saying, for instance, the aerospace, right? It's somebody in aerospace, somebody with the business, and somebody with the execution, and probably another fourth person, depending on where that industry is. So if we're doing database management, where you look at it, okay, that makes sense. I see why they're doing it. Same thing in, let's say, the $1 million home. So somebody has built the homes as a developer, probably if it's going to be a technical product, a technical person, somebody in strategy, so that it's less, you can still say logos, but you make it clear who has that background. And I will say, the first time I heard, I think it was a Techstars LA, it's called Expect Fitness. And what they're doing is, if you're pregnant, so it's kind of workouts for pregnant women. And so the team was somebody who's done videos for MTV, somebody who's OBGYN, and then the technical person who's mentored hundreds of startups and had multiple exits. And the first time I saw it, I thought, okay, I get that. They're the team to do it because they can produce the original content and do all of that. But yeah, no, that's a great question. And then the why now, I would say, what is that motivation? Especially, let's say healthcare, it's, hey, I've had a grandparent, or I've had, my parent went through this, I went through this, is there legislation? What's happening? And then when you're pitching, that's your opening hook of just, this is what happened to me, and here's what the problem is, and this is why it's painful, again, makes it resonate a lot more. So since we're almost out of time, we'll talk about milestone, lots of, again, slides are here. I will say putting it together is, when you're pitching, to start with the hook, we have the specific problem, we make it super painful, we all understand it. And then we talk through in a visual way of how do we actually solve it end to end. And we didn't cover the growth flywheel, which I think is the other unfair advantage of, this is how we're actually going to scale. And these are actually the metrics. And we've talked a little bit about the competition, and then the ask, tying it to milestones, to somebody's earlier point of, this is what we needed to get to the, this is how the raise is going to help us with the next milestones, and then the future ones. This is how we're going to scale. And those are very, very rare. And so hopefully, as you're pitching, you've probably found a potential customer. Maybe I enjoy when I've learned something new from a pitch. And then, of course, then I'll take the meeting. And then, as you can tell, there's no AI by the time you're done. So I'll close with more advice. I have a couple of slides. Highly recommend the book by Venture Deals. And that book is actually for people that are starting a fund. I know, there's founders here, but it's good to know what is on the other side. Like, what are those incentives to, again, pitch better? We talked about de-risking investment. Completely agreed. That's the, I would say the premise is, here's how we de-risked it. This was our idea. This is how we tested it out. We would like more funding to keep testing, but we already have some traction. And the traction could be partnerships. It doesn't have to be paid subscriptions. I would also argue, can you pitch as if you're the unicorn? So if you can say, like, this is how I'm going to be the next unicorn, this is what's going to resonate, because you're arguably competing against everyone else across all the industries. That's the maybe unfortunate part. And I highly encourage also going to different pitches, especially in different industries, and see what's resonating. Which ones can you follow along? Which ones you can't? What's going on? How are they telling those stories? And then lots and lots of resources. Starburst put this together, and this was the link for non-dilutive funding. We talked about fundraising from VCs, but if you can get grants, and then that could be part of the traction. Hey, we got a $2 million NSF, non-dilutive funding, or $1 million, or even $250K, helps you prove that out, helps you de-risk. And then there's trainings on YouTube on how to go about applying for this. Is a great resource as an alternative. I mentored a bunch of accelerators. I answer a lot of FAQs. If you want more time with me, let me know. And then this is the link to all the slides. And then I'll be around for questions. Thank you for having me.